Welcome to Called to Homeschool with your host, Meg Thomas. I am a mother of 7 with 5 homeschool graduates. Each week, we'll talk about real life homeschool, mindset shifts, and practical tools you can use in your home. Because homeschooling isn't just about school, it's about restoring the family. Hello, welcome back to another episode called The Homeschool. Just another reminder, I might be doing this all summer long, but I'm doing my in-person workshops happening and I'm really excited about those. I have one coming up in American Fork, Utah, and that's on the 27th. You can still grab a spot at www.coachmegthomas.com, and another one in New Berlin, Wisconsin on July 10th. So if you are really wanting to host one, I get some messages about this. Just email me at support@coachmegthomas.com and we totally set something up and let's have a lot of fun. So I'm really excited about all of those. All right, so this next week is Father's Day. And I did a special Mother's Day episode, so I decided to do a special Father's Day episode. I wanted to do a special episode for you to create the most amazing marriage. And so in my membership, I like to teach about foundations, right, to creating this amazing homeschool, because sometimes people flip it and think if I had an amazing homeschool, then my family would run well. And if my family would run well, I'd like my children. And they kind of go in this opposite order, but instead I go into a different order where the bottom piece of the foundation is our connection with God. And really that strong piece, and then working on ourselves. And then the third piece is our marriage, because wherever you are in your marriage, sometimes if it's going well, you're yeah, it does make homeschool amazing. And if it's not going well, you're you're right, it does make homeschool a little bit harder. So I really like this piece of marriage within the foundation because you're a team and these are your children. And so I also like to remind people that homeschooling is a part-time gig. And eventually your babies grow up. Now, I would be done homeschooling, but I had so many kids that I'm still going. But my 5 big kids are adults and they moved out of the house and they're married and having kids and they're creating these amazing lives on their own. But once my other 2 go, it's just my husband and me. And then what, right? And so for yourself, when your kids are grown up and moving out of the house and you're left alone with your husband, does that scare you? Are you worried about that? If those are some of the things that you're concerned about, then this episode really is for you. But really, this episode is for anybody because it has been super helpful for me as well as some of the things I'm going to teach today. So keep working on connection with your kids. Don't forget that because that is a part of the homeschool puzzle. But let's not leave out our husbands. So let's dive into today's episode. So I was walking with a friend a little bit ago, and she's awesome. I really like her. And we were walking, and she was telling me about a book she was reading, and it was a marriage book. She really liked it. It sounded interesting, but I thought my marriage is pretty good, so I really don't think I need to read a book like that. I don't know the last time we really had a fight. We don't threaten divorce or mention divorce or anything like that. But one day I was needing a new self-help book to read, and I thought, well, she really liked this one, so why not? And I bought the book, The Empowered Wife by Laura Doyle, and it changed my life and rocked my world. I love it. I've become a missionary for it. I actually emailed her to see if she would come on the podcast, but unfortunately I didn't hear back. I'm sure she would have loved to. But anyway, so I just want to share stuff from her book, some ideas, but I'm just scratching the surface. So if you're really ready to dive in, highly recommend grabbing her book. I just grabbed it from Amazon. She also has a podcast, which is awesome because you can listen to a lot of her clients' experiences and whatnot. So before we begin, I want to acknowledge a few things. Marriage advice can sometimes be really triggering for people. In fact, I've even been criticized and people have warned others about me on social media for talking about things that you could do that were nice for your husband. I didn't know that could be so offensive. Some people hear that and immediately think, why is it always the wife's responsibility? Why should I change? What about what he's doing wrong? And honestly, those are fair questions because none of us want to feel blamed, especially if we're already hurting. But that's not what this conversation is about. This is not about saying that husbands don't need to grow or that your husband is perfect. And this certainly isn't about taking responsibility for somebody else's behavior. It's recognizing a very simple truth. You only have control over yourself. You cannot make your husband communicate better. You cannot force him to be more attentive. You cannot control his thoughts, choices, or actions. But you do have control over how you show up. You have control over your attitude, your responses, your words, your habits, and your own growth. And that is the best news ever because if your happiness and the success of your marriage depend entirely on someone else changing, then you are powerless. But if there are things you can do today to improve the relationship, then you have influence, you have options, you have hope. One of the things I love about The Empowered Wife is that Laura Doyle doesn't spend much time talking about how to change your husband. Really, she doesn't talk about that at all. She focuses on how to change yourself. Not because you're the problem or the only problem, even if your husband has done things that a lot of people would probably agree were bad things, but because you're the only person you can change. And sometimes, and most of the times, that's enough. I've seen it in marriages, I've seen it in parenting, and I've seen it in families. So sometimes it just takes one person changing the way they show up to completely change the dynamic in a relationship. So as you listen to this episode, I want to invite you to resist the urge to think about what your husband should be doing differently. Instead, ask yourself, what can I learn from this? How can I grow? What part of this applies to me? Because whether your marriage is thriving or struggling right now, you always have the power to take one step toward becoming the kind of wife and the kind of person you want to be. And that's where real change begins. And I love the title Empowered Wife because this book is very empowering because it's something you can actually do. And she even talks about the power that women have in the home. And I see this with motherhood all the time, of the power women have to control the mood of the house and to be really intentional with what they're creating. And women have the same power within their marriage. So I'm going to talk to you about the 6 intimacy skills and go over them with you. And like I said, I'm just going to scratch the surface. But they are so good. So I hope you leave with a lot of great ideas today. So the first step is self-care. And she talks a lot about self-care. And sometimes that was kind of hard for me because self-care to me always I seemed selfish, right? And a lot of times women do spend so much time caring for everyone else that they do end up feeling exhausted, resentful, overwhelmed, and disconnected from themselves. Then they wonder why they don't have patience, energy, or joy left for the relationships. And I see this in motherhood all of the time. And realizing how important this self-care piece is, and it doesn't mean checking out and not being with your kids all day or just shoving them back in school so you can go to the spa, but self-care can look really, really simple. It can be going for a walk. You know, I love running. Those are great ways for me. Reading a book, and a bonus for me is reading a book in the bathtub. That is a great way for me for self-care. Spending time with friends, exercising, pursuing a hobby. Yes, you can have a hobby and homeschool. Taking a few quiet minutes for yourself. You have a new baby? It might be even simpler. Just brushing your teeth, brushing your hair, anything like that. I like to think of a lot of times I teach with self-care or taking care of your fundamentals, right? Your sleep, eating, movement, drinking water, getting outside. And so sometimes just by looking at these fundamentals and doing something that's just for you, we start to feel so much better and show up so much better in our relationships. Sometimes when we're trying to solve a relationship problem or an issue, when what we actually need is just a nap, a walk, a good meal, or a few minutes to ourselves. When we neglect these basic needs, we often end up operating from fight or flight mode. Everything feels urgent. Right? Everything is a gigantic problem. Moms are more reactive, more critical, more emotional, and less able to respond thoughtfully. It is much harder to be patient with your husband or your children when your nervous system is already overwhelmed. Taking care of yourself helps bring your body and mind back to a regulated state where you can think clearly, communicate effectively, and show up as the person you want to be. Laura teaches that a happy wife is often one of the greatest gifts a woman can bring to her marriage. Not because it is her job to make everyone happy, but because taking responsibility for our own well-being helps us to stop looking to other people to fill our needs that only we can meet. Anybody else here ever guilty of that? Only me? No? Totally have been guilty of this many times. So sometimes it is the most loving thing you can do for your marriage is to take care of the woman who is in it. So a fun challenge with that is to think of something that you could do for yourself. And once again, if you are in a phase with newborns, littles, it may be really simple. It's funny though, when I was first homeschooling, I started marathon running and I thought it's because I could be gone longer, get more time to myself, and then I could show up in a space where I could be calm with everybody. But that self-care piece really, I see it so much in myself and in my clients of when that is happening, things aren't as big of a problem. And so if you're feeling really reactive, that might be a really great place to start. Okay, now this next one is really, really powerful. And it is respect. And it has been so life-changing, everything in this book. I love it so much. So what I learned about with respect is that respect is to men what love is to women. Now, that doesn't mean husbands don't need love. They absolutely do. But many men experience love through respect. When they feel respected, they feel valued, trusted, appreciated, and connected. Most husbands are trying to provide, protect, contribute, and solve problems. They want to know that their efforts matter. When a husband feels consistently criticized, corrected, controlled, or treated like he can't be trusted to make a decision, he often feels disrespected, even when his wife doesn't intend it that way. This is important because many wives are trying to be helpful. My famous last words, I was just trying to help, not hurtful. We point things out because we see a problem. We offer suggestions because we care. We remind because we want things to go smoothly. But if our husband experiences those interactions as criticism, the results can be distance, defensiveness, or withdrawal. Respect creates connection. Disrespect creates distance. So what respect looks like? Respect does not mean just agreeing with everything your husband says, right? Of being, what are the Stepford wives of like, whatever you think and I have no opinion. No, it doesn't mean becoming silent, passive, or just giving up your identity. Respect looks like speaking kindly, even when you disagree. Trusting him to solve problems in his own way. And it was so interesting because this was one of the ways I saw that I had a lot of room to grow is I really inserted myself a lot into his business decisions. And it was so funny because this thought of trusting him to solve his own problems in his own way, he'd go out with a business partner and tell me something. I'd be like, hey, you shouldn't do that, or he should do this. And I just went, oh, sorry. That was disrespectful. I'm so sorry, right? So just like that trust, like you're a grown, capable man and you run a big business. I think you can handle this. So that was really big for me. Appreciating his efforts. Expressing gratitude, assuming good intentions, listening without immediately correcting, believing he is capable, speaking well of him to others, allowing him to have his own thoughts, opinions, and preferences. Respect says, I see you, I trust you, I appreciate what you do, I know you are capable. So what does disrespect look like? So it isn't always yelling or name calling, which is disrespectful, but sometimes it's much more subtle, such as constantly correcting him, interrupting him, telling him how to do things. I'm so guilty of so many of these things. It's cringeworthy, and like I had to do a lot of self-reflection as I was reading this. And it was so interesting because one of the things is like redoing tasks after he's completed them or redoing something. And he was out of town once and I thought, I'm going to be so helpful. And I like my closet super organized. And my closet is organized with dresses, tanks, t-shirts, long sleeve shirts, all color coordinated on velvet hangers. And I just thought, you know what? I should do this to his closet. And he has a lot of old t-shirts and hoodies that he just doesn't really wear. So I won't get rid of them because I learned that one, not to get rid of them. But I put them all in a bag for him to help him. And he came home and I just looked at his face like, why? Why do you do this? And so he's so patient with me, bless his heart. And I did that, and luckily then I read the book shortly thereafter, and I just went, oh my gosh, that was so disrespectful. You're a grown man. I don't need to do that for you. I'm so sorry. And I got so much love back with that one. So I'm only telling you some of the things I've done because maybe you'll see the things you're doing and just how quickly you can change them. Criticizing his decisions, treating him like another child to manage. Do you ever say the words like, my husband is my 8th child? That would be for me with my 7 kids, right? But almost behaving like his mother and treating him like your child. And that's really hard to be really connected and intimate on a married level when you have put yourself in a mother-child relationship. Speaking negatively about him to friends or family, assuming he can't handle stuff, giving unsolicited advice. Nobody really likes that. So most of these behaviors don't come from a bad place. For me, they came from this like, I was going to help, but this is so helpful, right? Maybe it also comes from fear, some of them, anxiety, perfectionism, but good intentions don't always prevent a negative impact. So like I said earlier about apologizing, how I apologized after I took a bunch of his clothes out, but I teach this with parenting too, of just the power of apology is not because I am responsible for everything in marriage or parenting or everything like that, but I need to own up when I make a mistake. And apologies create connections. And a sincere apology lowers defenses. It communicates humility and shows emotional maturity. So instead of spending years arguing about who was more wrong and who's right, instead, the empowered wife asks a different question. Where can I take responsibility for my part? So an apology does not have excuses or a list of what your husband did wrong or I'm sorry, but it's just like, I'm sorry for criticizing you. I'm so sorry. That was very disrespectful. I'm sorry I apologize for speaking harshly. Then stop. No defending. No justifying, no expecting anything in return. And this is every time with your kids too. When you make a mistake, you yell, you're critical, you say something hurtful of just like, I'm so sorry I said that. That was not okay. Because the apology, a sincere apology, is just acknowledging that I made a mistake. It's not to win, it's to reconnect. And often one sincere apology can soften years of tension and open the door to a healthier relationship. I had so much to learn from this one, and the next step as well of control. So one of the hardest ideas in The Empowered Wife is recognizing how often we try to control things we were never meant to control. Most women aren't controlling because they're mean. They're controlling because they're scared or afraid things won't get done the right way, quote, the right way. They're afraid of being disappointed, about mistakes, what consequences if something goes wrong. So we step in. We remind, we're being helpful again, right? We manage, we correct, we supervise, and we tell people what they should do. And often we convince ourselves we're just being helpful. So at the root of this, women, like if you really look at why anybody controls, it's usually out of fear, right? Because you think like, if I can just have everybody do what I think they should do, everything will be okay, which is so interesting because we don't know that. And even if we do things my way all the time, it does not mean that everything's going to be perfect. And so the problem is when we try to control anybody, nobody likes being controlled. I don't like being controlled. I'm guessing you don't like to be controlled. And husbands and children don't like to be controlled. And the more we try to control others, the more resistance we often create. Control may give us a temporary feeling of safety, but rarely creates the connection we're actually looking for. So I like to put myself in the shoes of when like we're thinking about this in someone else's shoes, and imagine if someone followed you around all day, telling you how to do things, correcting your decisions, reminding you constantly, questioning your judging, redoing your work. I often use the example of dinner. If somebody came and did that in your dinner, like, why'd you do this wrong? Why is this? Well, it would be better if you did it this way. You would probably feel frustrated, discouraged, and that's how our husbands feel too. They also may hear, I don't trust you. I don't believe you're capable. My way is better, even when those words are never spoken. Over time, some husbands stop trying. So if you have a husband that you're like, he doesn't really try and doesn't do a lot of these things, you may want to look in the mirror and just see, is it because I keep telling him he's not capable of doing it? I keep shutting him down, so he's like, what's the point? So some husbands will withdraw, others become defensive, not because they don't care, but because nobody thrives under constant supervision. So control often also creates the very thing we're trying to avoid. We want more help, so we take over. Then less people help, right? Have you ever done that of like, you want your husband to help you with the kids, but then you take over because he's doing it wrong, and then he just steps out. So we're trying to micromanage and people pull away. We want more peace. So we try to control everything, and then we become exhausted. Control is heavy because it requires us to carry responsibilities that don't belong to us. So what to do instead of controlling? Laura Doyle teaches respect and trust. This does not, again, mean to be a doormat or becoming passive, and once again, not to have any opinions. It means allowing other adults to their own choices. It means stepping out of the role of manager and back into the role of wife. Ask yourself, can I let this be done differently than I would do it? And I think that's a great question to ask. Like, maybe his way's right. Maybe his way will work, right? Can I trust him to figure this out? Can I allow him the experience, the result of his own decisions? Those questions create freedom for both of you. So it's interesting when you think about control and you imagine tug of war. So when you are trying to control somebody, you are in a game of tug of war with them. You're pulling, they're pulling. So you're trying to get someone else to change, trying to get them to behave differently, trying to get them to do what you think they should do. But what happens when you just let go of the rope? The struggle ends. You stop carrying around something that was never yours to carry. And suddenly you have more energy for the things you can control. Your thoughts, your actions, your attitude, your responses. Now that's where your power has always been, not in controlling someone else, but in choosing how you show up. Okay, the next skill, skill number 4 is receiving. And I thought this one was a really interesting skill. And she talks about this, that the feminine energy a lot is receiving. And a lot of times we think like feminine energy is that you have to be in a dress every day or all dolled up. But a lot of times that feminine energy is just really in receiving. So women can be very comfortable in giving. We give to our children, husbands, friends, communities, right? But receiving, sometimes that's a lot harder. And it was funny because I thought I was pretty good. I think I'm pretty good at receiving compliments. But I realized I was not good at receiving gifts or like help or things like that. So receiving means accepting what your husband offers without rejecting it, minimizing it, correcting it, or immediately trying to give something back. It can be as simple as accepting a compliment, letting him help you, letting him solve a problem, allowing him to do something kind for you instead of you shouldn't have. It wasn't necessary. I don't need another shirt. I don't need this, right? It just sounds like thank you. Thank you. That's it, right? So I get it that sometimes it feels uncomfortable and we're taught maybe like to be the strong, independent woman, but we don't want that burden of not having that help. And we saw a funny reel once where it was a husband with a young baby and like sad because he picked the wrong shade of pink for his daughter's hair bow. And we laughed at it, but it's so true that these little things that we're just controlling and not receiving, like, oh, you dressed the baby and you put a hair bow on her. That's adorable. Thank you so much, right? And you don't have to do everything on your own. So in the book, she teaches that many husbands express love through providing, being helpful, fixing, serving, and contributing. When a husband offers help and is constantly met with, no thanks, I already did it, you don't need to do that, he may eventually stop offering. So this is a great thing to think, is your husband not offering, is it because you usually turn him down? So it's not because he doesn't love you, but because his efforts don't feel wanted. Receiving sends a different message. It says, I appreciate you. Your contribution matters. I see what you are doing for me. So a simple challenge with this one. The next time your husband gives you a compliment, offers to help, opens the door, buys you a gift, or does something thoughtful, resist the urge to explain, minimize, or brush it off, and just say, thank you. It sounds simple, but it can completely change the feeling in a relationship because receiving isn't about being dependent. It's about being open to love when it's offered. All right, the next one is vulnerability. And another important, so many of us are comfortable expressing frustration, criticism, or disappointment. But what's often harder is expressing what's underneath those feelings. And the truth is, criticism usually sounds like strength, but vulnerability is where real connection happens. And I've totally been guilty of some of these. Instead of saying, you never spend time with me, vulnerability sounds like, I miss you. I've totally done that. Totally said stuff like that. Like, you should spend more time with me instead of just, I miss you. Instead of you don't ever help enough, maybe vulnerability sounds like I'm feeling overwhelmed. Instead of you don't care, vulnerability sounds like I feel hurt. Vulnerability isn't weakness. It's having the courage to tell the truth about what you're feeling without blaming someone else. She teaches that criticism often creates defensiveness, while vulnerability invites connection. And it's really interesting. And she talks about in the book, like, what if your spouse says something that you find hurtful, right? And so instead of getting defensive, she uses the phrase, ouch. And that's a very vulnerable phrase too, right? So if your husband's like, oh, and this looks like a mess, are you even doing anything? And instead of getting really defensive and angry back, of just like, ouch, ouch. Like, that's really vulnerable. And it's a beautiful place to start opening up connection and allows people the space to see like, oh, maybe I made a mistake right there. So some beautiful stuff like that with that. And the last one is gratitude. Focusing on what's going right. And one of the simplest but most powerful skills that she teaches is gratitude. Most of us naturally notice what's missing. We notice what didn't get done. We notice what needs to be fixed. We notice where our husband falls short. And the more we focus on those things, the more frustrated we become. It helps us notice but gratitude shifts our attention. It helps us to notice what's already working, the effort, the kindness, the contribution. This doesn't mean pretending everything is perfect. It means choosing to see the good alongside the challenges. Laura encourages women to regularly express appreciation for what their husbands are already doing. And this is what I always talk about within our parenting as well, as looking for the good. And it is not out of manipulation or trying to get more from them. It's because appreciation strengthens connection. And honestly, when people feel appreciated, they feel like doing more. So I'm not doing it with the intention of like, oh, what's my husband going to do for me or whatnot. But people naturally do. When you're like, wow, thank you so much for working so hard for your family. Often I get back like, thank you so much for making this meal. Thank you so much for grocery shopping. Thank you for doing our laundry, right? So looking at things with him, I love how patient you were with the kids. Thank you for going to work for us. I actually talked to somebody once about happy habits. And she's like, what do I do? My husband doesn't really want to be on happy habits, and I think he should. And it was interesting as we came up with it that your husband is already there on happy habits because he works for your family. And so even including that, if your husband, like if you're doing happy habits at your house of just like And your husband's like, I really don't want to do that. That feels another thing that I feel controlled about, whatever. But like, dad's on the list because he goes to work for our family. Isn't dad amazing? He does this thing. And whatever he does, like, oh, dad always gets the oil changed in our car. Dad mows the lawn. Oh, he's so good at taking care of our family, and really putting the public, like, showing him that and telling him that. Because gratitude goes such a long way. It doesn't ignore problems. It simply keeps the problems from becoming the only thing we see. And often when we start looking for the things to appreciate, we discover there are more of them than we realized. And I highly, highly recommend writing some of these down every single day. I like to write down like how my day was awesome. And so sometimes that can come into gratitude for my husband. Like he came home and made sure he was home in time for dinner. It was so amazing, right? So it could be gratitude with that. But I just love that idea of writing it down because it makes us think about it. We write it down, and then if we're ever struggling, we can look through it and remember, like, that's right, I married a total rock star. He is the best. So since I'm doing this episode with Father's Day, I thought I would just leave you with one last thought with it. That maybe your husband doesn't need another tie, gadget, or gift card, and you're totally welcome to do those if you really want to. But what maybe your husband wants most is to feel respected, appreciated, trusted, and loved. And that's one of the reasons I really wanted to talk about this book today, because the skills we've discussed, respect, gratitude, vulnerability, self-care, letting go of control, and learning to receive, aren't just good for marriages, they are gifts. When we stop criticizing and start appreciating, that is a gift. When we trust instead of control, that is a gift. When we take responsibility for our own happiness instead of expecting our husbands to create it for us, what a huge gift this is, right? So this is not because we're trying to earn their love, or not because our husbands are so perfect, but because healthy relationships are built one interaction at a time. So this Father's Day, consider giving your husband something that's not even going to cost you a dime. More appreciation, more gratitude. Right? And if you're a gifter, maybe you want to write all these down and put them in, like, these are all the things that I appreciate about you. These are all the reasons why I'm grateful for you, right? And if you're a present person, throw in a present there too. But more trust, more respect. And perhaps most importantly, becoming the happiest, healthy version of yourself. Because a peaceful, connected marriage is one of the greatest gifts you can give to your husband, your children, and yourself. Friends, have an amazing week, and I will talk to you next time. Thanks so much for listening to Call to Homeschool. If today's episode was helpful, the best way you can support the show is by leaving a rating or review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It helps more homeschool moms find this work, and I appreciate it so much.